By discussing mental alchemy in detail, I'm hoping to bridge the gap between science and religion as best I can. It's not always an easy task, but it's one I feel strongly about. In part because the alchemists of old tended to believe one could only manufacture the philosopher's stone if they were actively working on their own character. But more importantly, metaphysics has always danced in the realm of mysticism, which begs the question, what is mysticism? Mysticism is the experience of mystical union or direct communion with ultimate reality reported by mystics. The belief that direct knowledge of God, spiritual truth, or ultimate reality can be attained through subjective experience, such as intuition or insight. The idea of having a mystical experience seems incredibly magical to most of us. In a world ripe with technological advances and artificial sensation, the concept of looking within and deepening our spiritual connection seems very ancient and old fashioned. We have a tendency to believe that the world outside of ourselves is the real one, and our interior world is merely imagination. Mysticism urges us to shift our perspective by asking us to look within ourselves and search out what we feel. When we think of what drives most of our accomplishments, it's easy to think of all the stuff we accumulate. We get the nice house, the luxury vehicle, tailor our look to match that of a GQ model, find an ideal mate to share it all with as a part of this overall package. In doing so, we fail to miss that what we've always wanted was the feeling we hope to achieve by gathering material wealth. A house isn't a home until it's filled with laughter and sorrow of family. All that fulfillment already exists within us. It's resting within the recesses of our minds. The simple fact remains keeping up with the Joneses isn't a guarantee for that perfect state of being we crave. In fact, let's play with that idea a bit. How many of us are in debt up to our eyeballs, struggling to keep up the appearance of wealth? How many of us have endured toxic relations for way too long because of how we look to others? How many of us battle with addiction because we simply don't like ourselves? Maybe it's time to try something new. Maybe it is time to shift our thinking. Obviously, the superficial worldview isn't bringing us lasting peace. And as Steptanishi would say, if your religion doesn't bring you lasting happiness, then you're better off with the Pepsi, because at least that quenches your thirst. Let's put our thinking caps on and review the matrix in ancient terms. In Plato's classic, The Republic, he gives us a beautiful analogy for how we relate to and understand the world we live in. He tells his pupils of a cave where an ogre ties up a few prisoners. Their heads are stuck facing the wall with a giant fire burning behind them. A pathway runs between them and the fire. Figures cross this pathway and they see these shadows dancing on the wall in front of them. Having painted this picture, he begins his speculation. Wouldn't the prisoners mistake the images dancing on the wall as reality? Would they come to accept their view as the only one that is real? What would happen if one of them managed to escape? The escapee would undoubtedly note the figure scurrying back and forth along the path between the fire and the prisoners on the way out. Once outside, they discover a whole new world and realize how backwards their view had always been. Plato speculates that this prisoner would shy away from the brightness of the sun, being temporarily blinded, before re-entering the cave to tell his friends what he saw. In Plato's typical paradoxical fashion, our hero goes outside to look in. Understand, the cave represents the physical world of the senses, and our philosopher is stepping into the dazzling radiance of the mind. Like all the great mystics wishing to help us, the philosopher really wants his friends to be freed from their limited thinking. He wants them to open their eyes and see how much more to life there is beyond their mundane existence in the cave. Well, where would they start? How does one go about freeing themselves from captivity? Philosophy has unearthed a treasure trove of studies that deal in abstractions. Mystery schools had everything from geometry to the movements of celestial bodies and even harmonics, the study of sound. See, Plato believed the real power of all these disciplines lies in their ability to move the soul out of the ever-changing world of the senses into the eternal world of the mind. He saw abstract thought as a gateway through which our souls connect to the divine. Mystics from all cultures have always agreed that true spirituality applies this sort of backwards logic. The world we experience doesn't exist as it seems, and only the inner self can awaken to the true nature of reality. What all this means is the interior life has to be experienced firsthand. It's nearly impossible to explain the profound spiritual experiences we enjoy along the way. I mean, how many of us could skim through a text like the Tao Te Ching and be just as wise as Lao Tzu? Mysticism has to be lived. Now, let's demystify this whole arena of spirituality right here and now. The spiritual experience is completely subjective and open to interpretation. Never let anyone demean your experience or tell you you're doing it wrong. It's completely up to you and your walk with God. All any of us could ever hope to be is better today than we were yesterday. That's how we grow. Like Khalil Gibran said, no man can reveal to you aught but that which already lies half asleep in the dawning of your knowledge. The teacher who walks in the shadows of the temple among his followers gives not of his wisdom, but rather of his faith and his loving kindness. If he is indeed wise, he does not bid you to enter the house of wisdom, but rather leads you to the threshold of your own mind. The really beautiful spiritual lessons must be internalized by the seeker. Means each of us has to come to our own understanding. This is evident in the way people argue over those beliefs of right and wrong. The simple truth is, mysticism doesn't translate and has to be realized through trial and error. Spiritual leaders can give long winded discourses until they're blue in the face, but they can't walk the path for you. So start by doing it. Open your heart and soul to God. By simply being alive and aware of the breath in your lungs, you're already connected to the divine. This is how we awaken. We practice morality by seeing God in everyone, in everything we encounter, and serve as a devotee. We don't have to struggle with discourses and circular dialectics. There's no need to practice action without the fruit of action or confuse ourselves with paradoxes. We technically don't even need to meditate. All we have to do is love God and serve God in everyone we meet. We wake up and make ourselves available by saying, how can I serve? Altruism is to live in service of others, simple and plain. It's my goal to help others, and I thank you so much for the opportunity to share all the beauty and joy that I found during my walk with the mystical experience. Thank you so much for your time. May you continue to breathe in light and live in love. 100.